Hi there. Today we're looking at how to draft, cut and sew this beautiful cap corset top with puffed off-shoulder sleeve and basque waistline. If this is something you'd love to learn, do stick around and let's do it together. We draw this line to serve as our starting line. We divide our shoulder to shoulder measurement into two and mark. Then we add 1/4 inch seam allowance to it. Then our shoulder slope is 1.5. Our neck width is 3 inches. We join these 2 points together. Then we mark our shoulder to nipple, shoulder to under bust, and then our shoulder to waist. We square all these off. Right. Then we mark 1 inch away from the shoulder to nipple point. Then our nipple to nipple measurement is also marked. We mark the same nipple to nipple divided by 2 on the waistline. Then we connect these two. On the shoulder length, we divide it into 2 to locate the midpoint. Then we join it to the 1 inch we had marked earlier. Shoulder dart is 2 3/4, so 1 3/8 on this side, 1 3/8 on the other side. Then we connect them to where the shoulder dart is supposed to end. After that, we fold this very dart onto the next. Quite easy. Now we refine our shoulder slope. Then we mark our shoulder to shoulder divided by 2, and then we add our 1/4 inch seam allowance as we did earlier. We mark our round arm divided by 2, which gives us our arm depth. We square this off on this same line. We divide our bust measurement into 4, add our 2 inch seam allowance to it. We divide our arm depth into 3, we have 2 3/8. We square that off as well. This is our cross chest line. On the cross chest line, we divide it into 2. This dart is taking some inches from it, we add it, then we add our seam allowance. With these 3 points, we connect and mark our armhole. This is our waist measurement minus 2 divided by 4. Then our dart of 2 inches is added, seam allowance 2 inches is added. We connect these to the bust line. We're taking 1 inch from each side of our nipple to nipple line, and then we connect it from the waist to the under bust, then to the apex. We are refining these shoulder lines. To have our neck line, we come down by 4 inches. That will be the neck depth. With a curve, we connect our neck width to our neck depth, and we have our neckline. That is our front neckline actually. So the front is done. When it gets to the back, we are extending our bust line, or our chest line as some would call it, to the back. Then the waistline is also traced to the back. I think my line is not very straight, so I need to straighten it up. Right. Now we mark our arm depth, and then we square this off. Then our shoulder slope of 1.5 is also added. We square that off as well. We mark our neck width of 3 inches on the top, then our shoulder to shoulder divided by 2 on the second line. We connect. The arm depth is just like that of the front. We divide it into 3. We have 2 3/8. That is just as we had for the front. We mark it, then we square that, and this becomes our across back line. We divide our across back into 2 with our seam allowance. This is the bust divided by 4 plus a 2 inch seam allowance. We also, with the help of this curve, would mark our back armhole. the waist divided by 4, that is after we've taken our 2 inches from it. Then we add a 1.5 inch dart, 2 inches seam allowance to it. Then we connect. The nipple to nipple as we had for the front was 3.5. When it gets to the back is 3 3/4. We mark it on both the top and the waistline. Then we connect. We are doing 3/4 of an inch on both sides, and we're also connecting it to the top. As you see, our back depth, that is 1 inch, that is a back neck depth is 1 inch. So we'll mark our back neck hole as we are doing right now. And so we move 8 inches from the waist to the hip line. Then we divide the hip by 4 and mark, and then add our 2 inch seam allowance. Then we connect it to the waist. What we had for the nipple to nipple, we mark the same thing on the hip line. Then we connect. We're extending the waist dart straight to the hip. Right, then we cut the base so that we're able to fold this very dart onto the next. We mark 5 inches from the waist downwards. Then we square. Then taking off our seam allowance, we mark this curve. Right. And so we move upwards from the center front by 2 inches, then 1/2 of an inch. This is for the cleavage. From the shoulder, we come down by 7 inches. That is where the dress would start. And then we open our darts by 1 inch on both sides. We connect to the shoulder dart point. Then we curve this. We use an S-like shape to connect this other one also to the armhole. Then we connect it to the shoulder dart point too. We measure this and just oppose with the other. This is where it's supposed to end. And so we refine this very line. Now we're to connect from the underbust all the way to the 1/2 inches we have at the top here. Then we connect same to the bust point. We connect these two. Now the nipple to nipple we had here is also extended to the other side, and then 1/2 is added from this very point. Then we connect from the underbust dart all the way to the top. Then we also refine this inner line. Our cups are done. We extend this by 1.5 on the hip line. This is a boning channel, and so the direction doesn't really matter. Now we cut this side. We're to fold the new dart we have of the breast cup to the next, like this, and then we refine them. Now for that design on the top, we just connect from the center front to this side of the armhole in a straight line, and then we're refining our armhole. And so this is number 1, 2, and then 3. The arrow shows where the head would be. Now we'll go ahead and cut this out. This would be the side of the cup, and that's the head. We cut this one too, and this will be that of the center front cup, and that's the top, you see. Now fold this dart back on so that we're able to cut this. Right, and so if you are to arrange them, this is how it would look like. Now for the back, we move down by 8 inches just as we did for the front. Then we square off. We divide our hip measurement by 4, and then we add our 2-inch seam allowance just as we had for the front. Then we connect to the side seam. Our nipple to nipple we had is also transferred to the hip line. The dart is extended and then joined like this. We cut the base, then we fold this very dart also onto the next, just as we had done for the front. Now we also to mark 5 inches from the waistline downwards, and then we take off our 2-inch seam allowance. We're squaring this off. This is just to give a base. Then we mark this arc. Okay. We take off our seam allowance and measure the difference between these two, and then we mark the middle. We do same for the base. Then we draw a line to connect the two. And so this will be 4, 5, and 6. We are to connect this dart also to our cross back line. Right. Then we'll go ahead and cut this out. And so this is how it also looks like. And so we have used our pattern to cut out our fabrics, and then we added our seam allowances to the parts where we had cut the dart, and also the parts that were supposed to join, and then we had cut them through. And so when you look at 5 and then 6, there is a joining there. When you look at number 1 and then number 2, there was also a joining there. There is also seam allowance added where the arcs are, where the 2 caps were supposed to also join. And then when it comes to the caps themselves, seam allowances have been added all around it, excluding the tops. But then when you look at the other piece we have at the top there, the black one, also seam allowance is also added. And so these are our pieces: 4, 2 for the fashion fabric, 2 for the lining. And that is what we have repeated for them all, excluding the number 1 because it was cut on fold. Then this is the design we also have at the top. We cut our lace, and then we've also cut our fashion fabric. Right. So we also added our allowance from the base, and then this very portion, as you see. As we're going to join the caps, we pick one of the CF and then we pick the other side. Then we join. We do same for this other side, and then we repeat same for our linings as well. When it comes to the back, we're to join these two as we had cut them through. We're going to join them back. Right. And this is also the front. The center front would be there. Then we add these very sides, as you see here. Quite easy. We just flip them over, and then we'll go ahead and stitch, and we'll do same for the other side as well. And so on our sewing machine, we stitch the end first, then we'll begin with the other side, so that by the time we are done sewing, the 2 layers wouldn't surpass each other. Right, and so this is what we have, very neatly stitched. We are to repeat same for all the other caps. That's the fashion fabrics themselves and their linings. We create notches on all the curves that we have stitched. We open this up, we'll go ahead and iron. Then we cut our bone. The bone is also supposed to get short by 1/2 inch, as you see. Then we take it to a machine and we stitch. We're stitching 2 flat fill seams to secure the boning onto our cup, and this is being done on the lining, not the fashion fabric. Now when it comes to the back, we do the same. As I always say, it is more appropriate to stitch the end before you start with the beginning. It prevents the stitches from having one side longer than the other. Right, so this is it. We create notches when the seams have curves in them. We're also taking off 1/4 inch as we had added as our seam allowance for this concave cut we have to place our cup inside. When you do this, it's more appropriate. You can stitch it this way, where you start from the beginning, you stitch through to the end, but you only do this when you're quite sure that you'd be able to stitch it and then none of them would surpass the other. And so you do this when you have practiced it enough. If not, you go by this other one where you create notches. This is it. Okay, as I was saying, you create notches in the concave that you have, and then it is more appropriate that as a beginner you'd start the stitching from the center like this, and then you work yourself out to one side. Then you start from the center again, and then you work yourself out to the other side. And because of the notches, it becomes easy to do this very stitching, and neatly it's stitched. We cut 1.5 inch strip, and then we fold it into 2 to have 3/4. We sandwich it with a hem tape and then iron so that we have many of these strips. Now we're to transfer all the boning channels to the good side of our fabric. That we do so for the other side as well, and transfer all the needed boning channels to the fashion fabric, that is to the good side of our fashion fabric actually. Do well to subscribe to our channel in case you are new for more of such educative content. The rough edge is placed on one side of the line. We stitch all the way to the top, then we flip it over, and then we top stitch, and that conceals the rough edge that we have stitched initially. After that, we also top stitch that side so that we have a flat fill seam. Right, we repeat same for all the boning channels left, and that means the strips should be enough to cover both the front and the back boning channels that we have. Remember, these are just decorative because the boning has been done in the lining itself. These are just to give the lines, and it's also appropriate that you use the hem tape in between them so that it becomes heavy enough, and then our lines becomes as straight as possible. It all adds up to the beauty of our design. Right, there's a repeat same for all the channels. After that, we insert our cap as we are done for the lining. Working this out is not difficult, it only takes a bit of time. And so after inserting one, we also go ahead and insert the other. Yes, then we insert the bones into the channels for the back and the front. All that we do is that we leave half of an inch on both the top and the bottom sides, so that when we are stitching, the bone doesn't interfere with our stitches, even though it's a stitch on bone. And so you can see we've left half down here, that is of the bone, and we also have half at the top as well. We continue with our decorative strips on the boning channels, that is for the good side or for the fashion fabric. And repeat same for all the back channels as well. Right, now we're going to insert this. At first wanted to use the lace, but then because of the design we see here, I think it matches better without the lace. And so we open that up and then we fuse it with a hem tape so that at least we have it as compact as possible, and it becomes easy to also work with it when they are fused together. Right, and so after fusing this, we would also mark our seam allowance so that we're able to create notches along the seam allowance. So this is where our design is supposed to start from, and then it's supposed to end at the center front. And so we just stitch it along. Would want to go and then stitch the end first before we begin from where we just started. This is to make sure that we don't surpass this very point, and because of the notches that we created along the unfinished line, it becomes easier for us to also stitch this because we can turn it to the other side, as you see. The notches makes this quite easy to stitch. Right, and so this is neatly done. We're repeating same for the other side. Also making sure we stitch the end, then we start from the beginning. Okay, So this is what we have. So the next step would be to place our lining, matching the seams, the cap, and everything, and then we'll go ahead and then stitch. But then we've also made sure that the design has been pushed inward, so you don't see it outside like this. Don't also forget that when you are stitching your neckline, you'd also insert this hem tape, because it makes it quite crispy for you. It's intentional to stitch in bits. I didn't want to start from the beginning all the way through, but then from the center to where this very cup is, that's where we're stitching this. We initially stitched the end part, which was from the cup all the way to the side seam. Now I've stitched from the center front till one cup is done. We'll start from the middle and also work ourselves, through to the other side. And all this is to make sure that by the time we are done stitching, the lining and the fashion fabric wouldn't shift. They would all be in line. Right. And so we're going to cut our bra fold, and it's cut into this shape. No seam allowance is added. Now we're going to place them like this, and then use a zigzag stitch to also stitch them. And so this is what we're doing. If you don't have a zigzag machine, you can just add your seam allowance and then you stitch them, but make sure that you top stitch and you also cut your seam allowance to the barest minimum, because you don't want it to add any unnecessary volume to that very portion where you have stitched. So this is how it looks like. Right, now it's now time to insert our bones into the channels for the front part of our dress. We did not do so initially because when the bones are in there, it becomes quite difficult to insert the caps into the spaces that we had created. And so if we are done stitching all this and then we insert the bones, it becomes quite easier for us. And so we insert them in all the channels using the method that we always know. We leave about half of an inch beneath and then also half of an inch on top. But even with this, because the top is already stitched, we just place it there. After that, our bra foam is also inserted, making sure that we align it and then do the stitching exactly on where the stitches of the cap being fixed to the base is done. And so we're stitching it very close to the stitches already made. Quite easy. Then doing it for one side, repeating for the other side. After this, we turn the whole dress good sides together. We'll go and then we are just aligning them, making sure that our dot lines meet. All our seam lines are also meeting. None is shifting against the other. After they are secured, we add our hem tape and then we also stitch at the base. After stitching this whole thing, then we create notches all along the stitches we've made. As I said, creating notches along curvy lines makes it easy for us to turn and then also stitch. Now we're to turn the whole thing to the good side. It's a bit tedious, especially with the bones in there, but then by working it out, gently, you'd be able to do this. Right. And so because the design was also pushed inward, we're able to fish it out. Now we are aligning the stitches on the fashion fabric's cap to that of the lining. And so we just insert our pin like this. Make sure that by the time we turn it to the wrong side, it's also on the same line as we had pinned on the good side. We do this all along the caps. We do it all along the caps before we'd go and stitch. And this is to make sure that when we are stitching the caps, when we're doing the top stitch of the caps in place, we don't stitch more than we need. And so we'll stitch right in the middle of the dents that the 2 stitches created. That is the stitches with the cap and then the body itself. We're stitching in the dent so that nobody actually sees the stitching line. Right, so we'll repeat same for the other side. Look at how neat this one looks. We repeat same for the other side as well. Now we are to finish that of the back pattern, and so we're stitching the neckline also with the help of our hem tape. After that, we do our notches, then we top stitch. All this is to make sure that our finishing is neatly done. Then we turn them good sides together and also finish the base or the hemline in this instance. That's also with the help of a hem tape. And so the neckline, the base, then we also stitch the armhole. That is a little armhole that we have left. We would also finish that side up. And then the center back, where we're supposed to insert our eyelets, then do the lacing. We'd also finish that part up. Right, so after this, we turn it to the good side after we have, created our notches and all that. Then we also fix our eyelets. After fixing the eyelets, we place them good sides together like this, and then we stitch. Then this is our stitching neatly done. We fold them inward, and this is how it looks like. Now with our sleeve, we are marking 15 inches length, and then we've also folded this fabric into 2, and so we're cutting our 15 inches length. And the puff, that is a sleeve size, depends on what fabric you have and then how big you also want it. So we mark 3 inches and then 3 inches downwards. We cut this. Mine measures about 26 inches. That is the width of our fabric. We're folding half of an inch on the sleeve hemline. And so the whole width of my sleeve as it stands now is 52 inches. And then the length is 15. With the 15, we folded half at the hemline. We are folding half at the top here. And so, we're getting about 14 inches length. And the width, that's 52. After this, we'll go ahead and then we stitch the half that we have placed. We're inserting our elastic with the help of this safety pin. The elastic is a 1 inch elastic. We're going to insert it into this half inch. It measures 7 inches, that is for the top. I'm marking 7 inches on the elastic, and that is what we are inserting. As I said earlier, the elastic is 1 inch wide, and then we're inserting it into a ½ inch space. And this gives it a very good finish. I just realized it gives it a very good finish because it fills the whole space up and then makes it so compact, and that gives a very nice finish to it. And so as it gets to the 7 inches, I'll go and stitch that 7 inches, and then I'll pull the rest till we get to the end of our elastic. Yes, so the elastic is out now. We take off our safety pin, and then we'll also go ahead and then we stitch this part to secure both. Right, and so we cut the very first one off. See how beautiful it looks. Right, when it gets to the bottom part or the hem part, we mark 10 inches, and so the top we marked 7 of the elastic, and then with the hem we're marking 10. We use the same process where we insert our safety pin and then we push it through the 1/2 inch space. We work it out till we get to the edge, just as we did for the top. As we pull it through and then it gets to the 10 inches that we had marked on the elastic, we would go and stitch that part. Then after we've pulled the whole thing through, we also stitch the end. And that is basically how we insert this whole thing. And so you can see the mark on the elastic, that is a 10-inch mark. This is it. Right, that is it, and we've stitched it. After that, we'll go ahead and then we neaten the edges, that is the rough edges. Then we'll place them good size together, and we'll go ahead and stitch this very portion that we are fixing our fabric clippers. We'll repeat same for this. And so this is how it looks like. Very beautiful, if you ask me. It's now time to insert it and stitch it onto our dress. And so we just match in the side seam. We'll work it till we get to the top, as you see. If you don't have a fabric clip, you can also use your pins just to secure them, as we usually would do. Right, so we'll go ahead and stitch this, then repeat same for this other side. Right, this is quite easy, but then it gives you a very beautiful finish. We'll go ahead and stitch this too.